Okay, welcome everybody this morning. So unfortunately we don't quite have a quorum right now. We know that Councillor Hassan is in the building, however we haven't managed to locate her. So our choice at this time is we're going to start with the workshop because it's a public workshop anyway, and then we'll move to doing the minutes and any business that requires a quorum after the workshop. Hopefully that's okay. And we do have apologies from Mayor Sam as well, and I'm not yet aware of any apologies from Councillor Munt. But yeah, workshop team, take it away. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Chair and Councillors, for being here today. My name is Eilish. I am one of the strategy planners here, and I've also joined with Ryan as well. We're here to report to you on the area plan progress to date, including the engagement summary from the My Future Town public engagement. At this stage, we aren't explicitly requesting anything from you, so take this as more of an update as to progress to date, but we welcome any questions, comments or suggestions that you might have on our progress thus far, or what you'd like us to pay special attention to in the option development of the area plans. Just quickly wanted to step back through the background of the work program that's led us to where we are today. Back in October 2024, Waikirikiri-Katoa Future Selwyn was signed off. Waikirikiri-Katoa is the document that sets out the strategic direction for Waikirikiri-Selwyn and what our area plans will align with. Guiding our area plan work are the 6 strategic priorities. We have the blue-green network, transport, housing, people, communities, our economy and our infrastructure. Ryan will touch on these 6 strategic priorities and their role in greater detail further through this presentation. If we move to the output section of the page, you will see our main focus at this stage is the area plans. Much like Waikirikiri-Katoa, the area plans will inform our other outputs listed, the district plan, long-term plan, action plans and policy and bylaws. Are the slides working, sorry? My apologies. There we go. So sorry, we were just at the output section of this slide pack here. The 3 areas, the district's broken into 3 areas. We've got the Melvin, Eastern and Ellesmere area. The boundaries of these areas remains the same as existing area plans, and each of the areas is led by a member of the strategy team. I look after the Ellesmere area plan, Ryan here looks after the Eastern, and Ryan King to our left looks after the Melvin area. I'm sure you're aware now that the area plan development is made up of a number of steps and inputs, and this slide here speaks to some of the key ones that will help shape the 3 options that we'll be bringing to you later in June this year. I'll be covering off the early engagement component, and then Ryan will cover off the remaining strategic priority investigation papers, urban growth approaches, base data and constraints and monitoring, and the peri-urban, which will eventually give us the area plans. The early engagement report that was provided to you as a part of this agenda, as I'm sure you've seen, is incredibly extensive. So I'm here just to sort of give a high-level summary of what we found, what we've heard from members of the public. It's worth noting that this is Council's most extensive public engagement to date. We think that the results of its engagement speak to its success as well. On this slide is a snapshot of the breadth and depth of the early engagement work, most notably the 900 people that the Strategy and Marcoms team spoke to at the drop-ins, the 4,800 visits to the website, the 2,650 crowd map comments, 8 World Cafes and 6 Rural Edge Connected Van drop-ins. While this is just an example, a handful of examples, they help present the picture as to the extensive nature of this engagement and the successful outreach to both our urban and rural communities. This next two slides here are just some word cloud summaries of the key themes that we heard from each of the 6 strategic priorities. So for the blue-green area on the first of the left here, we can see the common themes of parks. This was prevalent in the areas such as Rolleston, more specifically the area that's been earmarked for the district park. Playgrounds, interestingly, had a really great conversation with a family about the need for accessible playgrounds for our more vulnerable playground users, and having them so that they're fully fenced so that they don't have to worry about their kids dashing off onto the road or other unsafe areas. Trees and green, although green is a bit nondescript, this is certainly from conversations that we had. I can reflect specifically on the Lincoln World Cafe events, where the likes of green corridors and integrating our green spaces into our urban environments was a key idea that came up repeatedly. Additionally as well, not necessarily just for Lincoln, but certainly that interface between the rural and urban environments, and creating those green buffers or green corridors between the two. The top right there is your housing key theme bubble. We saw themes of both high and low density options. People appreciated and understood that density is needed in some areas, but they requested that the appropriate density be applied. So what is high density in Rolleston may not necessarily be high density in the likes of Darfield or Leeson or Southbridge. Diverse housing came up quite a bit. So this is people who were requesting a diversity of housing for both young and elderly people, so people who are wanting to age in place as well as get into the housing market as well. We see a lot of 3-4 bedroom homes being built across Selwyn, and we can understand that that's not necessarily providing for the whole spectrum of house dwellers and house owners. Affordable housing, it's a bit of a hot topic, I guess, one that is an interesting space to work in and around, but certainly prevalent in the likes of Lincoln, with the students trying to find appropriate rental accommodations whilst they are studying. In the economy bubble, which is the last one here in the bottom right, no surprises that the large format retail likes of Kmart and Mitre 10 were the big winners. This largely came up in sort of our eastern Selwyn townships, so your Rolleston, Lincoln, Prebbleton, but certainly out towards the Melvin and Ellesmere areas as well. Entertainment facilities was a hot topic across both the young school-aged children and young people of our district, as well as their parents. So quite a lot of the conversations that we had with them would suggest that they don't have those informal or formal entertainment spaces that they can meet with their friends and hang out that are outside of their school and or extracurricular activities. The last one there is your shops and supermarkets, and this was most notably in the areas that are newly developed in our district, so those new subdivisions that haven't yet been integrated into the existing town that they reside next to. So we found a lot of comments with regards to how people had to travel quite a distance to get to meet their everyday needs and amenities. The next slides here cover off the infrastructure, people and communities, and transport. So on the left here is the infrastructure topic. Common theme here was for council doing the basics well, so that's your wastewater, water and rubbish services. Flooding concerns came up as well, as you can see in the bubble, both rural and urban areas. Certainly some topics of conversation with regards to climate change and how this will exacerbate some of our more vulnerable communities. In the people and community spaces, everyone wants a pool. I'm not too sure how we're going to manage to do that, but that will certainly form a big part of our education work that'll come through in the second phase of our engagement. Schools, this is an interesting space again, as it's not council's mandate to obviously provide schools at this in the current policy frameworks. However, it is a recognised issue across our district and many of our communities outgrowing the schools that are presently there. So certainly a space for us to explore and the options and our role there. Healthcare as well came up, 24/7 medical healthcare, your blood banks, your blood labs, x-rays, people wanting to essentially get all of their healthcare needs met within a town or an urban centre near them without having to travel into Christchurch City. Transport was probably the topic that had the most feedback and certainly the most annotated polygons and lines on our crowd map. There was very strong themes of public transport. This is both connecting towns internally to itself and also to other towns as well, with a request for public transport offerings to Christchurch City that are both regular and efficient to reduce the private vehicle reliance. Cycleways, both internal to townships, but also between towns and in the rural areas on providing that recreational way for people to travel to and from work and also on their weekends and their leisure time. Certainly a conversation I had with a gentleman who lived out in Leeston, I believe, and he had a great suggestion for a cycle ring road in and around the township. So those are the sort of options that we would look to explore later in the day. Safety was another one. I recall a conversation I had with multiple families, from West Rolleston Primary School. They spoke about the number of roads that their children have to cross on their daily commutes to and from school, and if there's ways that we can look at creating a more safe route for them. And finally, roads. So making sure that our roads are up to scratch, they're connecting our townships efficiently and effectively, and that they're prioritising the maintenance and upgrade of key transport routes as well. Before I hand off to Ryan, I just thought I'd quickly touch on the next stage of where we're at with our engagement. So we're obviously assessing the feedback that we've received from the public, making sure that we can integrate this into our 3 options and understand the gaps or areas where we perhaps need to provide a bit more education or analysis for our public to understand council's role and also the options that they may have ahead of them. We're in the current early stages of developing the engagement format with Marcoms and the wider area plan delivery group, and we look forward to continuing the success that we had with the My Future Town engagement with the area plan options.
Cool. So Eilish has gone through the sort of the exciting kind of front-facing aspects of stuff of what we've been doing to feed into the area plans and to inform them. I'll be sort of covering all the things that we've been beavering away at in the background. So the intent is to come up with 3 clear, viable, different options. We're truly committed to make sure that each 3 option is just as viable as the others, and where we can explain the costs and benefits, the opportunities and the risks of each one. And so we are currently working on building those 3 options at the moment. So the sort of the framework or the skeleton of what we're using to base this on is these 3 different models. So we've got we've got the polycentric. The next slide, I think, is monocentric. That's hub and spoke and monocentric. So these are just 3 different models of very kind of basic 3 different models for how urban spaces can develop. It's definitely not sort of comprehensive, and it's sort of got plenty of gaps. The intent isn't to consult on these 3 options in themselves. These are just the starting framework so that we can kind of build to make sure that the 3 options are clear and distinct. So once we get to the final options, it won't be, are you wanting a monocentric model? It'll be, are you wanting a model where we can kind of put high concentrations of high density in the centre of towns, which will give us the benefit of getting critical mass for things like public transport? Do we want to concentrate our growth in certain towns, or do we want to disperse it? The opportunity of concentrating it means that we can kind of concentrate our services, our pipes, our roads in certain areas, which has affordability benefits, but having a more distributed growth pattern gives us the opportunity to provide services closer to where people are living, and sort of to really kind of build up a wider kind of more dispersed model for accessibility and building up individual communities. So those are the sort of the three basic models. At the moment we're working with experts from across council, all the people who often come and speak to you about about what they're working on, wastewater, transport, urban design, community services. All these people are kind of coming in, making sure that as we build these, that we're not missing anything from their perspective, that there's not any sort of major sort of gaps that haven't been considered. So this is sort of a cross council sort of development. We move on to the next slide. So with another consideration that we're bringing in is all the base data and constraints. There's obviously on the slide in front of you, there's just a few of them. We're still building the sort of GIS layers that we're using. So things like the airport noise contours. We're bringing things like the Gammock Estates or the CRI land, which will sort of influence where we can and more specifically where we can't grow, and to sort of early eliminate areas of where we don't want to grow, so we can kind of work out where it makes sense to grow into, what we need to consider. So we're kind of building up this layer and looking at different levels of that. So certain constraints are definite no-goes. If there's, obviously there's some places where you just want to avoid completely, other areas where it might be a consideration that you can work around, but you should be carefully thinking about if you're moving into. And then the third ones is sort of considerations that have an impact that you would need to take into consideration, but aren't definitely a sort of a no-go or a concern. So things like contaminated soil, which can impact the opportunity to develop there, but can be remediated. If we flip the next slide. So the other big bit of work that our team's been working on for the last year or more, we've been doing the big deep dive into finding out anything and everything we can know about the district and about our strategic priorities. So we've got our strategic papers that we're just tidying up now, and they're based on the strategic priorities from Future Selwyn. So we've been looking at everything we can find about what we know of the district, what we know about kind of where congestion is, kind of where all our bus stops are, where we have sort of high concentration of houses, where our age, how old the houses are across the district. Just a huge anything and everything we can find to help inform us, and also we're kind of looking at sort of wider evidence base for what good urban design is to inform the growth of the development of the area plans. We're also looking at the peri-urban, so it's not just an urban, it's not just developing the urban spaces, it's also considering the rural environment around it. So that includes things like the green belts that were identified in Greater Christchurch Transport Plan, how and what they could look like, where they should be exactly, things in the peri-urban space, how we can kind of make use of the rural space around urban centres that are not fully rural in their character, but also aren't urban, and other opportunities to provide different spaces within those. Different land uses, so things like doing kind of green corridors for bird migration between our townships and up to the mountains and down to the coast, and a range of other things that we can try and find in there. So this is sort of the picture of what we're building. We're trying to consider. We're taking essentially all the information that we've learned from our community, what they're passionate about, what they want to see for the future. We're combining that with what we know good urban design is, what the assets we have, the opportunities we have at the moment as a district, all the evidence from wider research into these things, and also the considerations that we know from within council. So we're using all these things, and we'll be coming soon to bring these options to council. First, to go on to the next slide. So in terms of the time frame, so in about the next month, we're going to be coming back to you and presenting these three options. I would say that the three options, because we don't want to get too into details at this stage, we don't want to sort of be getting into conversations about what property's in, what property is out. We're looking at the sort of the broader scope. It'll be sort of large brushstrokes approach, kind of indicating areas and directions rather than saying this this property is within a certain area or outside a certain area. And then once we've come back to you, let you kind of have a look over what our three options are. We'll be coming to the council at the end of June, the 25th, and presenting it to the council to have the wider discussion with you about whether there's any further changes that need to happen, anything you'd like to see before we take it out and consult with the community on the three options. So that's essentially where we've got to at this stage. We've been busy beavering away and excited to kind of bring these options to you, but we can open up to questions about the process or...
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I've got Deborah's light on, so we'll just start with Deborah and then move around to Bob, who's obviously got his light on next. So, cheers.
Interesting that you've mentioned about the Gammick Estate and you've actually got... Can you tell me what you know about the Gammick Estate?
To be quite honest with you, Councillor Hassan, we don't know a whole lot about it. We do know that it is a land parcel that's held in perpetuity, to our understanding, held in perpetuity for rural land. But at this stage, it's been a high-level identification of a possible constraint, but it would be needing to be something that needs to be explored further before we sort of strike it off, essentially, if that makes sense. But happy to have a conversation with you if you have some information that might be of use for us as well.
I do, because the trust deed actually got changed a few years ago through the courts.
Right, okay.
So it's not what everyone expects it to be now.
Okay,
And I do hold all the information.
perfect.
And I don't know, I'm hoping the council still has a copy of the information that I've all got. So I just don't know with regards to the archives, but I do have copies. I do have a copy of the information, both Councillor Miller and myself, with regards to the process when Mr Marshall was here.
Great. Yeah, that'd be great to have that conversation.
So it's very important that you actually do understand the process that it's gone through with regards to that large land area of parcel, that large parcel of land holdings now. So
Great. That'd be great to have that conversation offline with you, and we can feed that into the area plan options and development. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Bob?
Yeah, just looking at the future, there's a lot of things like cell phone towers, water quality, all coming up in that, river maintenance, transport, medical centres, and all these. What are we going to be able to do to make these happen? Because none of them are really up to us to do. They're all other entities that would be doing them. So I just want to know how this is going to fold into getting these things done that people expect.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you, Councillor Mugford. I sort of touched on it briefly. There is, we think, at this stage, a bit of an education piece that needs to be attached alongside of the next phase of public engagement. Certainly highlighting those I suppose, infrastructure that people interact with on a daily basis that isn't necessarily council's mandate, but perhaps there's space for a wider conversation for the council to have as well with regards to our role that we can play in those spaces. So I hear your concern, I suppose, in terms of how we can help people along on the journey to understand that may not necessarily be a space that we play in, but certainly looking at how we can pick that up through the process as well.
Yeah, because a couple of people I've spoken to, what's in there they expect to happen, sort of thing, and I think there's a wee bit of that expectation in there when, as I say, like if ECAM don't want to put any more buses on, it won't happen regardless of what we do, basically.
Yeah, we're very aware of that, and we don't want to be kind of giving people false impressions about what we can deliver versus what we are hoping or what we're working towards. So we are, we didn't touch on it too much in this discussion, but we have been in conversations with a lot of government entities, a lot of stakeholders, and so we meet with the Ministry of Education and other ministries to to kind of highlight these things. We're not going to plan where they put their schools, but we can, through our identifying where we want growth to go, we can give them a better direction of where they have certainty for schools to go, where they know they're going to be children in the future going forward, because we know that's a concern, and they've got limited resources. So there'll be a kind of combination of things that council is looking toward providing itself, and it'll go and form the long-term plan, but there will also be aspects that we want to kind of clearly mark as this isn't council, this is sort of what we're wanting to work towards. So saying we might need more schools, we might need more high schools here, but as we get and we're growing to this level in the next decades going forward, to kind of have that indication, but clearly separate that as a sort of what we can't provide but are looking to see and are going to need.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll just ask Megan or Elizabeth, do you guys have any questions, ladies? No? Okay. Yeah, it was interesting reading some of the bits in the reports, particularly when you contrast it against other conversations about the same topics, like for instance with public transport. So many people asking for public transport in rural areas, but actually when you can stack up the numbers, it's a difference between that, the knowledge of what it is that you need to make things work in some ways, and then the fact that actually that doesn't come for free, and how does that inform, once that information's there, how does it change the conversation? I guess that'll be an interesting part of, as we go further through the process, is that sort of thing likely to be fed into the final plans?
Yes, so that's we had very clear intention about how we wanted to do the engagement. So we've got it in those 3 different stages. The first stage, which you've got the report on, is that very early engagement, and that's just going out and hearing from the people and listening, not putting any constraints on what they're asking for at this stage. Just we want kind of unfiltered views, and with that we acknowledge does come sometimes a bit of the sort of the very aspirational, very exciting, without maybe always considering that everything has a cost. So yeah, I mean, if we provided as many pools as what was asked for, then there'd be a pool on every corner. But it's about kind of understanding that there's a passion, and then the next stages, and so the area plan, the 3 stages will be sort of saying, if your township grows, there might be an opportunity for that potentially in the future. But if you don't want your town to grow, then there's a kind of an opportunity cost for that. And so we will be kind of working in, and we're kind of considering what are good ways and novel ways to be able to get people thinking of those lines of what is the cost? Do I want to be able to provide? Yeah, what's the most important thing to me? And knowing that we do have sort of very limited resources, we are kind of very concerned about sort of keeping things as affordable as we can. But that's this next stage that we'll be getting into.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on a school visit with Mayor Sam last week, and we got interrogated by some students at Rolleston Christian School, which was great. We had a fantastic conversation, but it was interesting to see the light dawning and they were sort of year 6, 7, 8. And just as they suddenly realised, we want time zone and bowling alleys, but we don't want the town to grow. Okay, here's the problem. So it was really interesting conversations. Another question I had was around, did we have a great deal of diversity in terms of who was responding? Like, was it particular age groups or ethnic groups and everything else? This question is partly because I've been having some conversations with people about road safety, and there does seem to be people are coming in, particularly immigrants. I mean, I'm an immigrant, but you come in and you've got different road rules and different expectations of how people will behave on the roads and in various places. And it's interesting that we can't build to everything, but when we're talking about expectations of being able to walk or cycle or bus, or just who gives way at what intersection, or this, like, I'm not quite sure what I'm asking, but the most part of it is, did we have a diverse range of people responding to these questions and taking part in the workshops?
Yeah, to the crowd map, we didn't collect any sort of demographic data to be able to understand the population or ethnicity splits. But certainly a lot of us were present at a number of the workshops and events that we went to over the summer period, and I can certainly attest to the broad range of people from different groups and age groups that I spoke to about their concerns for their future town, or what it looks like for their future town, given the experiences that they're currently having. With regards to the World Cafes, I do believe we collected some data in terms of the number of people that attended, but I don't think, again, it was to the degree of, not demographic data again, but just from, if I can recall from my own memory, again, there was a broad range of people. Typically for the World Cafes, there were people sort of in, maybe 40s upwards, but certainly at some of the events that we went along to, like the Teddy Bears Picnic, Leaston, the Music in the Park event, Kite Day, there was a number of younger families with younger children that came and engaged with us in the physical maps that we had with us. And anything that was on the physical map got put into the digital crowd map as well. So we feel like it's a pretty well-rounded approach in terms of gathering information from all walks of our people.
Cool. I guess there's still quite a long way to go. So it would be interesting to know further along, like as it starts to narrow down to a final plan, to make sure we're covering all the different groups. Just because you don't want to get a plan that's supposed to go for the next 50 years and realise you've missed out certain voices.
Yeah, we do. I'd just add to that. So we did things like the workshops, the drop-ins, which probably get certain parts of the community, which I'm definitely not minimising their input and their insight, but there is sort of a whole portion of the community that isn't excited by that.
This is true.
And so we did some work with the schools, and we found not just that it gets the kids engaged, but kids go home and talk to their parents, and they are better advocates for kind of getting excited about this stuff than we are. So they go home and talk to their parents about it, and their parents, and they're like, oh, there's a map online, can we do that? So we've, while we don't have any evidence about it, we kind of heard some anecdotal stuff from teachers and stuff about how kids are excited and kind of taking it home and talking to their families about it. So it's a great avenue in. Some of the kind of community events we go along to, once again, if you can get kids sitting down doing some colouring in, then the parents are stuck there, standing there, and you can have a talk to them, even if they might not normally talk to council staff about the growth of towns. So we kind of found there was opportunities. We also, like I said, we tried to make it this first stage as open as we could. So we put very few barriers, and with that came some costs in terms of, with the mapping, we decided not to have any requirement to have a login or any barriers to entry. We tried to create as fewer barriers to entry, because as soon as you put a small amount in, you lose a large portion of the population. So at that stage, we've kind of made that conscious decision, but we know that these next stages, and as we go along, we need to be more intent about making sure we know who's saying what, so that we can respond to them, that we can kind of have that conversation and make sure that we've got a broad sort of understanding that we're trying to capture the whole community.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. The last question I have is possibly, it's around the slide that's got the date of the council meeting on it. Just because, at least in my diary, I've got the council meeting down as the 18th of June, not the 25th, so I'm not sure if that's changed.
That very well could have. My apologies.
Yeah, that's
the
okay.
case.
We can figure that part out. We've got some more lights on. I'm going to go to Deborah, just because it gets quite awkward with the red lights and
Okay,
everything,
sorry.
but then Elizabeth afterwards.
Sorry, it was just that a question that you raised actually came across. I just wonder, how are we working with our communities close to Christchurch? Because we have some communities with boundaries, and I'm thinking Templeton, where Christchurch are one side of the road, and we're Selwyn, and we're on the other side of the road, with regards to the dividing line between Christchurch and Selwyn. Now, for that particular community, their community bounds both Christchurch and Selwyn. And we have another area, Matakarara, in a rural area, where we have a similar boundary situation. So we do have these, and another area is with Hallsville encroaching on Prebbleton, where we basically, Christchurch is growing out towards Prebbleton, right? And we do have these road boundaries with regards to the different planning principles. And I just wonder, how are we communicating with our neighbours where we actually have a district, a plan that's going to be just a dividing line, which is going to be a straight in a few years to come, because that's the way that the planning is coming to meet Selwyn from Christchurch. And there's very good reason for that, because everyone is moving inland. So I just wonder, what is our priority with working with our neighbours with this regard to this process? Because they are still communities of interest. All they're doing is, being divided by a street. And I just wonder, going forward, how are we going to actually deal, from a planning provision with our neighbours, with that hard edge that is going to be coming very quickly towards Selwyn?
So at this stage, we haven't included any communities outside of the district. We are aware that we are very close, and there's communities that are very close. We didn't want to be stepping on Christchurch's toes, but we do sort of engage with our Christchurch counterparts. But it could be something that, at the moment we're working on how we do the next stage of engagement with those three options. We can kind of take that we'll consider that through our kind of continued development of those, and we can kind of come back and provide you a bit more information for the next, when we talk to you about the next stage of engagement, about how we'll kind of, what our approach will be with those communities, and how we can kind of make sure that those cross-boundary complexities are managed.
Yeah, just having read quite a bit here around the engagement process and having heard you just now. So with the My Future Town, you've done the school workbook and some other things which are really fantastic. That information, is that all collated together? You haven't separated it into what the kids want versus what the adults want? It's all just in the one big pool which feeds into the general directive, is that correct?
So the engagement report that was attached as a part of the appendices for this meeting agenda steps out the specific school engagement that we undertook with, was it Leaston, Clearview and Prebbleton, I think it was. So that very explicitly steps out the feedback that we heard from them and the winning My Future Town workbook as well. But with respect to the information that we received from the public engagement perspective, so the My Future Town crowd mapping, we spoke to before that we don't have any demographic data that could split any comments that were made either from a child or from an adult. So the specific engagement for the schools, yes, that's been split out, but the public facing hasn't, correct.
So in the overall way that the report's getting written up, it's just compiling all of the information from all the sources together.
So anything where we specifically worked with, where the children were a target of our engagement, so any work within the schools and things like that, we have kind of kept separate and kind of as distinct from the general engagement. If a child came and put something they asked for on one of the maps in the libraries, for instance, we can't kind of clearly distinguish, and even sometimes handwriting can't make it any clearer what they're asking for. So anything that's on there, we don't have the ability to kind of separate out.
So for example, on our page 31, which is our transport, so you've just got feedback, community feedback across the Selwyn district indicates a strong desire for safe and viable transport options. And then you've obviously got the comments of subtopics, etc., etc. All of that is collated from both the primary school and the public input, regardless of age. That's what I'm getting at.
To correct, the information with regards to the feedback summary at the end, so from the page that you've referenced onwards, that information has come from the crowd map only. But what Ryan was speaking to before is that the crowd map has been compiled of information from drop-in sessions and people just adding their own comment cards at an ad hoc basis, and that's the information that we don't have the demographic data for.
Okay, any other questions, anybody? No? Okay. So because we started with too few for a quorum, we heard the update initially. So would it make sense to go for the recommendations for this report, and then we'll go back to the beginning and do everything else? Okay. I'd like to move that we receive the report. The other recommendations are acknowledge changes to work programme relating to rural work, which we didn't actually discuss, I don't think, and provide comments. So we've done comments on area plan briefing. Do we want to mention the rural parts?
Yes,
we should have all read it in the report, but
Yeah, so
just to outloud it.
just touch on it. So so in that side there was the peri-urban space. So there are elements of the outside the urban space that we are considering, but there's aspects that we have decided we need to kind of give more time and more sort of specific focus to in terms of the rural environment, the kind of, I guess, the environmental and the sort of land use, potential land use change, things like that. So yeah, there's sort of, because we think we want to do it due, it's kind of give it its due and make sure we spend the appropriate time. So we're going to be coming back with sort of a further set of work that focuses on that more the rural aside from the urban thing later on.
Elizabeth?
Can I just request that there's more information about what you mean by land use change? Because it's just a term that I've heard, but I'd like a lot more of the wider concept of that. And also I raised the issue the other week when we had the presenter talking about the peri-urban stuff. At the moment, people buy the land and they determine, obviously the developers determine how it's going to be cut up and that. So how are we looking at implementing peri-urban when we might not have the tools necessary to create those spaces? So again, I'd like to know what you're suggesting in terms of what we're actually going to do on the ground.
So there's two questions. So in terms of the peri-urban, we're still looking at what are the opportunities and so things like the green green belts that were identified in the Greater Christchurch spatial plan. There is a whole myriad of different ways that things like that could be delivered. So we haven't made any decisions yet. So part of that will be through the area plans, bringing options to the community and saying, how would this work? And yeah, we're not in a position to sort of like force. Yeah, we're not looking to sort of force homeowners. We don't have the means to force or the intent to force anybody to sort of manage their land different, but there can be opportunities working with there are interested landowners who could be willing to sort of work alongside us. So yeah, we don't have too much information yet. It's sort of still a developing process. Yeah, in terms of the rural land use, that's dealing with, just for some examples, you'll be well aware that there's a lot of interest for things like solar farms in the community, in the rural space, and how we sort of manage that. Is there a way we can kind of be kind of on the front foot in managing kind of how and where things like that go? And that's just, so there's a few different examples, but yeah, how do we, as sort of climate shifts or sort of market forces shift or technology shifts like with solar, how can we sort of make sure that we're sort of doing the best we can in that space? Yeah, once again, not sort of being proactive rather than sort of if that's.
Steve, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it touches on the point related to the recommendation and to that question, Councillor Munt, that I think what we've learnt through this process is just to have a simple rural category is a far more nuanced, especially as we've got the peri-urban information coming through. So we want to actually take more time to get more detail, and that's the intent of this work program, is to actually separate that out and be more intentional.
You actually want the deflection of the sun off the concrete anyway. So is it something that you guys can have a look at when you do look at land use change, or any of the other My Future Town possibilities?
Yeah, that's absolutely part of the considerations, sort of in that rural spaces Ryan was speaking to before. Yeah.
Sorry, Bob. Deborah kindly turned her light off so that Elizabeth could ask a question. Do you still have a question, Deborah? Yes, I do. Bob, could I get you to turn yours off, and then we'll go back round again? Just a
thank you.
reminder
No.
that we are learning with these mics, but if
Yeah.
you potentially have any other questions, keep your light on. Don't turn it off, because that then causes issues
okay.
and can't be heard easily.
Thank you. Just with regards to, I guess it's looking at the development of the eastern side, given that we're the eastern side is part of the Greater Christchurch Urban Development Partnership Arrangement, and that's managed by ECAN. With regards to the eastern, and because it has that layer on top of it with regards to the planning mechanisms, how much leeway do we have under that partnership to actually divorce ourselves from what Environment Canterbury want, because we cannot be inconsistent with what Environment Canterbury want, but have, bring in our own autonomy with regards to the eastern and the growth expectation, because that's very important with regards to understanding that portion and the governing factors versus the Melbourne and the Ellesmere that are outside that planning regime. And I just need to understand, and that's why I brought up the question earlier about how are we dealing with when we've got dividing lines that actually go down through streets. We've got no rivers or clear boundaries. They are just streets now that, that separate us. So just trying to understand the planning mechanisms for the eastern side that will make it different or separate it out from the other rural sectors.
Yeah, so because Eastern is within the Greater Christchurch spatial area, it does have that extra complexity, and also it's got 80% of the population, so there's a lot of growth happening in the eastern portion. So I guess there's those two different aspects. There's the Greater Christchurch consideration, so that's the spatial plan and sort of the intent of growth that was identified there. While we can kind of, the Greater Christchurch spatial plan was very high level, and they kind of intentionally kept it high level to give us plenty of room to move. So we're not looking to sort of change that, I don't think. And the future Selwyn sort of, I guess, followed on from that in our district picture. Things like Rolleston being the sort of the main centre for growth. I don't think we could change that if we wanted to. But in terms of like the direction, how and where we do density, high density, like it has been touched on in our engagement of people saying it needs to be done appropriately in the right locations. So through the three options in the final area plan, we'll look to sort of identify where we think those are. And then there's the kind of regional spatial which is more the ECAN's legislative sort of requirements. And so there'll be work at making sure that we align, but we do have scope to sort of there is plenty of scope, but there is sort of some things that we would need to kind of that would have to very carefully think about, and one of them is like keeping kind of all growth is to kind of stay in the townships. There was sort of, and that spatial plan element, it was keeping the kind of there wasn't any intent, or there was an intent to kind of keep the townships as separate through the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan.
Thank you. Bob?
Just one of the things I noticed in there, in one of the rural ones like Whitecliffs, there was people said that they feel they lose part of their town during the summer, and that's something that really have to look out for over there, like Coleridge. All of those are really opposed. They've got a sort of almost entitlement of what they believe it's theirs. And the other thing is they're concerned about that if too many people come there, the prices of the houses might come down and that. So there's quite a lot of work in that. I think you could get a skewed answer if you're working in those small townships.
Yeah, I appreciate you didn't have a question, so to speak, Councillor Mugford, but I suppose just to speak to those points, Ryan King is working in the Melbourne space and attended a lot of the ECV, I think it's called, EdgeConnector van, events with those sort of small rural tourism almost communities, those sort of communities where we have a lot of the population don't necessarily live there on a permanent basis. So they had a really good turnout with people who do live there on a permanent basis, and yeah, to your sentiments, heard a lot of korero about that, about those challenges that they face. And interestingly, the uptake of permanent residents that they saw post-COVID as well, just with people's work climate and environment changing, and also the cost of housing as well going up. So yeah, it's a very interesting space to work in, and we look forward to exploring it more.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because it's a lot of work for something that isn't really it's not going to be a statutory document that has to be followed, but at the same time we need to know it's going to be useful to have that plan for the next few decades, because if somebody wants to do something in a certain place where we haven't planned any infrastructure for it, we need to be able to go, well, this is why, and we can't always divert the plans. And as part of the rapid growth of this area, we've been our funds and our projects have been diverted quite a lot of times by unplanned changes. So the more we can try to hold a line of this is why we're doing what we have planned, hopefully this will be supported by the new legislation. She says hopefully. Okay, so back to the beginning there. So I'd like to recommend that if we could get the recommendations up, well, I'm not sure if that's needed, there's only a couple of them. But yeah, I'd like to move that we receive the report, acknowledge the changes to the work programme relating to rural work, and providing comments on area plan process briefing. Seconded by Bob. Everyone in favour? Right. Anyone against? Nope, carried. Thank you very much. Cool. And yep, we're going to go back and belatedly do the parts from the beginning. And I apologise because I also didn't actually start with the karakia. I got completely it was a bit confusing right at the beginning there. So I believe if we didn't actually open with a karakia, I shouldn't finish with one. So apologies for that. So in terms of apologies, we did have apologies from Mayor Sam and also from Bob Love. So we have Steve today. Thank you very much for joining us. And so we'll have, I guess, apologies for lateness from Councillor Hassan and Councillor Munt. Everyone, all in favour? Oh, sorry, anyone want to second the apologies? Yep. All in favour? Aye. Thank you. Obviously we didn't identify extraordinary business, but was there anything else anyone would like to bring up at this point? No? Okay. Were there any conflicts of interest? It's a bit of a hard one with this because we all live in the district, so obviously we have, but shouldn't be any particular difference in interest than anybody else in the public. Yep. And also the minutes from our previous meeting in February. Would anyone like to, okay, so Deborah's moving. Anyone like to second? Bob? All in favour? Anyone against? No, carried. Thank you very much. Oh, matters arriving, yep.
As I recall, we had a workshop at our last meeting with regards to the district park. That information is going to be shared with the rest of the council, like this information, further information.
I believe so. So from, if somebody can clarify for me, so on the slide when I asked about the council meeting, is that actually more of the, so will you be presenting to the briefing session that we have on the 25th, or is it going to be the meeting on the 18th? Because if it's for the full briefing session, then that would be when I'd expect all of this sort of feedback to come back into council. So it'll be the briefing? So yes. So they
So the district park will, the information for the district park will actually come to council from the workshop that we had the other week.
if it wasn't as part of that briefing, then it'll be somewhere further along, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep track of that. Thanks,
Okay,
Deborah.
thank you.
Because that was a PX workshop. So, yep. Okay, so just to double check. So yeah, I apologise if the reason for lateness for people was because the time was changed. Originally, this meeting was going to be at 1 o'clock today rather than 9 o'clock. But it's worth keeping note. I apologise for me getting muddled with trying to catch up and do things back to front today. But yeah, it's worth keeping track of what's in diaries and yeah. So thank you very much, everybody. Is there anything else that we need to discuss before we close the meeting? No? Okay. Thank you very much and see you at the next hui. Kia ora.